The whole idea here is you're making this a white glove experience for the seller. You're making this as easy as possible. If you've got to start sending tons of paperwork for the seller to sign, you're now crossing into that area of like, well, how is this white glove for them now if they're all involved in having to do all these things?
It is very important that they understand the paperwork, because if they don't, you're sitting on a ticking time bomb.
Welcome back. If you've been following this series, and hopefully you've had a great experience and you're learning a lot about novations. Guys, we're doing an entire masterclass series on this one strategy of how to do a novation. And I brought the best of the best. Rich Wonders.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's been so wonderful to learn from you. I've learned so much, and I've been doing novations now for a while. And just based on the things we've done so far, I'm making a lot of changes in my business. So thank you. And guys, I hope you're also having that experience. Leave a comment, please, and let us know what questions you have, what things you're learning, your big takeaways. Participate. I know you're probably watching this on YouTube, but I answer those questions, and Rich will probably jump in and help answer those questions. We want you to have everything you need to be successful at this. By the way, we are doing an entire series, and we're putting that in a playlist, so we'll put that link below. So watch these in order. If you want to learn this strategy well, be sure to follow us in order, because we're trying to kind of move along from what you need to know first and then second and so on. So that's how we're kind of mapped out this series. So look for that. Also, we've got some resources for you. We have a quick start kit that's totally free. Look for that in the description below as well. That'll have things that will really help you do this. There's a checklist and some contracts and some things that will help you. Also, I want to also mention that Rich will partner with you on Novation Deals. And we'll talk more about that again at the end, so stick to the end of this video for that. But on this video, we're really going to dive into the paperwork. And this is a part that trips up a lot of people.
Right.
And I think paperwork is one of those things where if you're new at real estate, new at transacting, either wholesaling, doing novations, really anything, people think that the paperwork is this big, scary, audacious thing.
Right.
Certainly it's important, but people tend to overcomplicate and make the paperwork this daunting thing. So hopefully we can kind of make it not so daunting and simplify it a little bit, or help you really understand how to structure the paperwork, because the paperwork is certainly key. Yes. But like you said earlier, Rich, in our previous videos, paperwork is more like the feature, not the benefit. And what really matters here is the benefits of how this solves problems for sellers. The paperwork is just one of those things that's like a necessary evil we have to do, but it isn't the main thing. So don't make it the main thing. If you're making the paperwork the main thing, you've missed the boat here, right? Okay, so take it away, Rich. What do we need to know about paperwork?
Sure. So there's a couple different schools of thought on the paperwork. And I'm not going to, I can give my opinion and tell everybody what I do, not to say that the other ways are wrong, right? And our paperwork has evolved over doing different deals, and there's a few kind of different schools of thought. I'll just name the three pieces that we use on every transaction. So you got your purchase and sale agreement, which is essentially a 3.5-page wholesale contract that has a few extra clauses in there. One disclosing that we're going to be reselling it. It's an assignment slash novation clause that says that we're going to be working with a third-party buyer. We at least have the option to. The second piece of paperwork is the attorney in fact. Okay. Now, power of attorney versus attorney in fact. There's different schools of thought, and I've actually done both. Right. And
what's the difference?
So a power of attorney needs to be notarized. And in the seller's mind, it's much more scary. So you need a mobile notary or a virtual notary, but it needs to be notarized. But here's the thing: people hear power of attorney. For most people, they have a connotation of being on life support, and that's the person that can pull the plug on them, right? Because like power of attorney, is very daunting. And here's the thing: it's not necessary because a few things. One, if you have the seller sign the buyer's offer, it will eliminate the need for a power of attorney, and it'll eliminate a lot of mess that comes along with that, both with the lenders, both with it seeming, the optics of it, of looking like you're hiding the fee from the seller. And a lot of people will use it that way to try to hide the fee from the seller.
Because remember, just to put context to this, the whole idea here is you're making this a white glove experience for the seller. You're making this as easy as possible. If you've got to start sending tons of paperwork for the seller to sign, you're now crossing into that area of like, well, how is this white glove for them now if they're all involved in having to do all these things, right?
Correct.
So the idea behind the power of attorney would be, you sign this power of attorney, I'll make all the agreements and I'll sign all the things, and you don't have to, seller. You can just sit over there and wait for closing. Like, that's the mindset around it. And there's some validity to that, right? Because we want to make this a simple process for them. Otherwise, might as well go with an agent and you sign everything and you do everything, right?
Correct.
So what you're saying though is, you're saying, hey, there's some ways to handle that and still give them that hands-off experience without having them get a notarized power of attorney where they feel like, well, this is a really big deal. Not only are you introducing a whole nother layer of complication because a traveling notary has to meet them, stamp the thing and all that.
Yeah.
But you're also creating this maybe unnecessary objection.
Correct. And it raises their resistance where they feel like, okay, can you now steal my house from me with the power of attorney? Can you change the price without my permission? And all these red flags start going up in a lot of these situations, right? So we use the attorney in fact, and the only thing we use it for is to hire the agent, okay? And normally you can hire the agent with it if you know
sign a listing to sign a listing agreement.
To sign the listing agreement. We have the seller still fill out the seller disclosures. So basically we have a pep talk with the seller beforehand and a pep talk with the realtor beforehand, and the realtor will make that call or see them in person and go through the condition stuff with the disclosures.
Which is required by law.
Correct.
To have a seller disclosure. So if you don't know, a seller disclosure is a seller has to go through this whole list and checkbox yes, no, maybe, I don't know, about everything on the property.
Yeah, and the way we originally did it was flat fee broker. We just marked unknown for everything on the seller disclosures, right? And it's just a massive red flag for the buyer, right? It's like, whoa, what are they hiding, basically?
Yeah. In Michigan, we put a great big cross through it and say, because in Michigan, you can say never lived in the property, I don't have to disclose.
Yeah.
But that's not the case here because it's the seller's on the contract as the seller. So
correct.
You got to fill that seller disclosure out, right?
Correct. Yes, because you're essentially representing the seller in that capacity with the agent. So the seller's truly hiring the agent, but you're just the one that is the mouthpiece. That's the mouth and the eyes and ears and everything. So, and there's certain cases where you can't use the attorney in fact. For example, if the person you're dealing with is already the power of attorney. So let's say the seller is, one family member and they're having, say, their daughter or granddaughter handle it for them. You can't be a power of attorney of a power of attorney. So the workaround for that is you just have the power of attorney sign the listing docs. And then people say, well, then won't they know that you're listing it? Absolutely. Well, I mean, we tell them. We tell them, right? So a lot of these things that people would say, well, then won't the seller know? The response is yes, they do know. Like, for example, like how can you let them sign the buyer's offer? Well, they already understand that, and we set the expectations early and often of they're going to get their amount. So like the amount that they're promised on the contract, even when we're going through the paperwork, reiterate it several times where it's like, and you'll be getting your $427,000. Like, here's the thing too. The seller does not want to be involved in the play-by-play of the transaction. You don't want the seller to be your business partner in the transaction. The reason that you're even in the picture is to shield them from that, because for us it's exciting, for them it's stressful. And even if they think they want to be involved in it, when they actually are, it doesn't give them a better experience, right? So yes, they do see how much we make. And that's also why it's so important that you give them a 5-star experience and you move quickly. Yeah. Because if you're 6 months down the road and they see you're making all this money and they feel like this was as complicated or worse as a traditional experience, then why are you even involved, right?
So is your purchase agreement, I call it a pre-marketing clause. Is that your assignment novation clause in the purchase and sale agreement?
Yes, and we don't do pre-marketing because we're not representing ourselves as the buyer. Even though we're signing a purchase and sale agreement, we make the clear distinction, we're going to be reselling this to a third party.
And that's that clause, that's your novation clause.
Correct.
And then you not only have it in there, because your point isn't just to hide it, you talk about it and you make sure it's super clear that that's what you're going to do.
Oh yes, part of our closing process, and one reason why we're able to get such a high conversion rate on that first delivery call is we sell the sizzle, then we keep that short and sweet. That doesn't need to be, the closing process is a monologue. It's not a conversation. There's not room for back and forth, because here's the thing. All the questions they're going to ask if you go too far in selling the sizzle are all going to be answered in the contract. And it's a much more effective communication tool for you to go through the contract piece by piece and explain it and let them see it in black and white, rather than them have an objection. You give the perfect rebuttal, but it's just the nature of it is whenever there's this back and forth, one, people don't remember everything you say, right? That's one thing. And two, they can't necessarily trust it the same way they can when you're literally reading it off the agreement.
And you're going to do it anyway, so
and you
why
have to do it anyway?
Yeah.
So why double do it? So we run them through, and maybe I'll circle back to the purchase agreement. So we run through it line by line, and on the more complicated things, pretty much everyone, we give a short summary afterwards, right? Where we tie a bow around it, make sure they comprehend it. If they have any questions or objections, give them a chance to voice that if necessary. But the thing is like, even when we go through the price, there is no asking, hey, what do you think? Does that work? We assume it and we say the price excitedly, and then we move right through it and go down the next things. And the contract that I use is specifically laid out where all the biggest benefits to them are first, right? So we're going off the high of selling the sizzle to all the benefits, like the things like the cash as is, all the most important things. The price is right near the top as well. It's like the second thing underneath the language of the purchase and sale. And then we go through, but I go through things like the default clause, where I explain to them, hey, look, I read it out, and it basically explains what happens if either side defaults. And then I'll tell like a third-party story of like, hey, Mr. Seller, so, if by odd chance, your neighbor has a rich uncle that leaves them a small fortune, and they're offering everyone on the block to $1 million to buy the property so they can move all their family and friends. I know, it's not a likely scenario, but just understand, once the train leaves the station, we're married together on this, and we're committed until we reach the promised land. And, if that were to happen, or if the odd chance if someone were going to try to knock on your door and offer you something, just know, once we make this commitment, we're committed to you, and you're committed to us, and we're going to work with it together. And if the odd chance that does happen, you need to redirect them to us. And there's even the language in there of like, if seller fails to perform, buyer has the right to pursue any legal remedies, where it says that. And I let them know, I said, look, we've never taken a seller to court, and we probably never will, but this has to be in there just so everyone understands this is a serious agreement, and we're going to be dedicating time and resources to this right off the bat, and we're fully committed to getting this done. You know what I mean? So once we enter it, so I squash that objection early, and this is before they even sign. So this is the big thing. If you get really good at setting the expectations and you have a clear, concise way that's effective to communicate them, it eliminates all these problems down the line. And it actually helps your conversions too. Because people think, well, why would you want to go over the default? That's going to make them think about it, and they're not thinking about that. Well, yeah, they're not thinking about it right now. But now's the best time to go over that, not when they're trying to cancel and they change their mind, and then now you're getting in this big fight with them. And even if you win them over and you threaten to sue their pants off and ruin their life, right? This isn't a cooperative seller, and it's not a happy seller. So it's much better to set the expectations up front, and people respect that. And it also provides them the clarity that they need. Because here's the deal. A lot of these motivated sellers, they get decision anxiety, and that's how you get into foreclosure. This is how you get a house in disrepair, is they're not making decisions on the appropriate timeline, and it ends up working against them. So we give them the clarity, and I know someone was asking the question, like, what do you say when they need to think about it and everything? Here's the deal. I don't have a lot of people that say that, because I make sure I answer everything, and normally the I need to think about it is often just they need reassurance, and you need to uncover what it is. Is it just a decision anxiety? Is there a hidden objection? What is the root cause of it? But in the front end, if they're like, hey, just so you know, before I'm not going to sign anything today, I need to talk to my attorney. Hey, that's perfectly okay, Mr. Seller. You're more than welcome to do that. I just want to cover through everything while I have you on the phone. And very often, by the time we go through all the paperwork, all of a sudden they don't need to talk to their attorney anymore. And really they're setting up just kind of a blockade because maybe they're the type of person that's made a decision in the past that they regretted. And they're giving themselves a little buffer because they like you, right? And they don't want to let you down. And they don't want to get into this confrontation that turns ugly at the end. So they're kind of setting up like a little buffer ahead of time, just in case if they're not ready to make the decision, they already told you and you can't hold it against them. So that's an objection I ignore. And sometimes they really do need to talk to an attorney. If they're an analytical type or if they have high anxiety, that's fine. You know what I mean? I have another process at the end when we direct, because we direct them to sign like they never told us that they have to talk to an attorney, right? Yeah. We just assume the close because that's what's going to make them the happiest. The least happy seller when they get off the phone is going to be the one that you didn't compel to sign, that likes you, likes the offer, likes the process, and they're ready to go, and they just didn't pull the trigger because they have decision anxiety. That's going to be the person that tosses and turns that whole night. So I honestly look at it as if I can get this to a resolution, since we've already put in the time, effort, and energy, if they don't have a massive objection with the price, there's a very good chance that we're closing that deal on that call. And there may need to be some reassurance that happens, right? While we're going through everything. But I have some killer rebuttals for that really just nails it on the head, concise, very specific, and reassures them. Where afterwards, they leave with the warm and fuzzies feeling good. Because here's the thing, they just want their problem solved. They don't care how we do it.
So you're using the paperwork still as all part of your close process. Because
absolutely.
When you talk about like going through the contract, you're preemptively overcoming objections before they become objections.
Correct.
And you're not assuming that, well, by bringing up this objection, now I created an objection. You're assuming that if I don't set the proper expectations by resolving this objection now, then what I'm really trying to do is resolve it before it ever becomes an objection down the road.
Correct.
And if you think about it, this is how I treat contractors in my fix and flip business. What I found with contractors is the more clear you can set the expectations about the timeline and the draw schedule and what happens if we're behind and over budget and how we do change order, like the more of that you get super clear and communicate really well in writing up front, all of a sudden all your contractor problems go away. Right. But when it's unclear and then things happen later, now it's too late. It's a big mess now because they're thinking one thing, you thought the contract said another, but you didn't communicate well. Now you just open the door to have all kinds of communication problems, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
you're
and
using
then,
that. It may feel like it may seem like, well, you're going through this contract item by item, but really what you're doing is you're solidifying your close by helping that seller feel even more comfortable about the whole process.
Yes, because even if they're not thinking of those objections at the time, they likely will later at some point, a certain percentage of them, right? And then also, if you just have them sign, when they read the contract themselves or they give the contract to a friend or neighbor or whoever, they may not interpret it correctly. And then now all of a sudden, they're angry with you.
Their dad's giving them a different opinion or whatever, yeah.
Correct. So I empower them not only to have clarity in their own mind, but also to communicate it clearly to the other people that may be in their lives, right? Where now also, they're not seeking out because this is what happens sometimes, right? If you don't explain the contract. Because when I first started doing these, I wasn't taught to go through the contract line by line. It was like, get them to sign, and if they don't read it, that's on them. They're grown adults. That's their business, right?
Yeah.
And we had a much bigger backout rate and fallout rate because of that, because they would sign it and feel all good, and then the next day they would wake up and they would have the, equivalent of buyer's remorse, seller's remorse, right? And then they'd be like, oh, well, I didn't even read the contract. Let me give this to my neighbor that sold a house once, or, you know what I mean? They get some advice from their barber who's also a licensed realtor or whatever. And then they would get all worked up and we'd get calls back where they're like, you guys are trying to scam us, and it would be all upset. And it didn't happen all the time, but it happened once is too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And also, when you can provide that crystal clear clarity, it makes them more comfortable, because the thing is this: if you explain it to them and you don't close with action, people only remember a small percentage of what you tell them. They remember more so how you made them feel. So when you go through, even if they don't remember all the things we go over on the contract, they remember that you took the time to explain everything. You took their
answer their questions.
You answered their questions.
All the things. Yeah.
You cared, right? You wanted them to not only agree but to understand, and that also builds that rapport and that professional trust that's so important. And it's congruent throughout our whole process, from the first call they get from our intake specialist to the final closing. Everyone they talk to is a genuine good person that really puts them first, and they see that this is just how this company is. And it just builds more trust throughout the process, because there are times too, right, in the later part of the deal when you're dealing with buyers, you're dealing with different things where things go wrong. And all those deposits of equity into your relationship, you're gonna have to make some withdrawals, right? If you have a buyer fall out. On one deal we had, it was over $104,000 we made. The lady was in foreclosure. We went through 4 buyers, and her auction date we had put off with the bankruptcy, but it was in Georgia. And it wasn't put off indefinitely. And we were getting right down to the wire. And she had $250,000 in equity even after our fee. And believe me, there was withdrawals of our relationship equity that had to happen. But luckily, right, we had deposited so much, we didn't get hit with any overdraft fees. And she was ecstatic when we closed. And she knew exactly how much we were making. We saved her. Like, without us, she would have just completely lost the house. And it was also a house we could never wholesale. It was in a golf community. It sold for, I think, $750,000. So, we only made maybe 12% margin on it, or whatever that is, quick math. But it is very important that they understand the paperwork, because if they don't, you're sitting on a ticking time bomb. Maybe not on every deal, but it's something you can eliminate, and it also makes them more comfortable in actually making the decision. Because they're like, okay, great, I have all the information, we reviewed the contract front to back, I'm good with this. They have clarity in that moment, and the logical step is, all right, we've already been through this entire process, let's have a resolution. Let's make sure this isn't all for nothing. And your belief is so critical of transferring that belief, and it has to be genuine, that this is the best thing for them. They're in the best hands possible, and they have a whole team that's going to handle it with care and treat them like family. So that belief and that assumption that this is the right thing, and of course they're signing, we have no uncertainty of, well, what do you think? Do you want to do this? It's like, it's so painfully obvious that this is the perfect solution. We would have to be crazy to even question it, us, right? And if they do question it, right, we don't tell them, what are you, crazy? Like, obviously, right? We are patient with them, and we reassure them, and we hit the hot points over and over of the reassurance points on why this is the perfect thing. And we have some specific rebuttals that we use and go through there. And then we take the time and patience to remain on the phone with them. And even if it gets uncomfortable, because sometimes it does, right? This is a massive decision for them. And they're normally already in a situation. So being patient enough to weather the storm. Back to mindset, right? Not being emotionally involved that you care, but not emotionally involved that you get upset when things don't go your way. Being patient. And also putting their needs first and really trying to see it from their point of view, and not blaming them for not automatically just going with your solution, but trying to figure out, okay, what is it that's holding them back? Is it decision anxiety? Is there a hidden objection? Is there another option that maybe we thought we eliminated, but they're still considering? And there's different probing questions you can ask to deal with that. Or with some people, it's just literally they have a hard, fast rule that they won't sign something when they see it. That's a very small percentage, and a lot of people act like that aren't really like that. But there's a certain percentage of people that are like that because they made a bad decision in the past, and they made an oath that they would never do it again, right? And with those people, you have to be patient and just confident that you laid the groundwork, and when they're ready to make the decision, they will. And you can't just push them past a certain point because it becomes counterproductive at some point.
And mechanically, when you do walk me through the mechanics of it. So you have your discovery, then your anchor, then your delivery. And if you're doing this virtually, then you're emailing them a DocuSign type of document,
Yes.
right? They're going to open that up on their email, and you're going to be on the phone with them while they're looking at it and you're looking at it, and you're going to say, okay, do you see clause 7? Let's go through this Like that's the process, right?
Correct. And I walk them from the top of page 1 to the bottom of the last page.
Page 3 or 4, whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's happening though, still on the phone with them
Correct.
looking at it. And that DocuSign gives them electronic signature. So when they're done, the goal here is that they electronically sign that and you're fully executed on your contract.
Correct. And we also reiterate to them, hey, this is an electronic signing, but it's just as valid as if we were face to face at the kitchen table signing with wet ink. But I go through all 3 documents before I direct them to sign. So we go through the purchase agreement, and if there's no hard objections in the purchase agreement, I already know I'm 3/4 of the way there. And really, once you get past the price, you're 2/3 of the way there. If there's not an objection in the price, you've got a very high probability. And if there's any objection other than the price, it's a communication issue normally, or there's a hidden problem that you didn't know about that could potentially not be a fit for the property.
And going back to what you've been saying, most concerns people use it's a deceiver. It's not the real. You have to uncover the real issue.
Correct.
So, usually talking to my lawyer or I got to talk to my wife or those are usually not real objections. There's something else. You haven't done your job making them feel comfortable or something else going on.
Correct.
That you need to try to uncover.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so the attorney in fact we use just for the listing, right?
How do you explain that to them?
That one, I don't read through the whole thing. I keep very simple. I say, because there's a whole clause on the MLS in the purchase agreement. But one, I don't give the purchase agreement to the realtor because you're going to have a really hard time finding the best realtors if you're trying to make them your wholesale buddy. Okay? Think of it like this. The realtor, just like in the military, right? Everybody has their mission. The mission of the realtor is to sell the house quickly and provide all the services needed to make that happen. Get the vendors, coordinate, and all that. So it needs to be on a need-to-know basis. So I don't use that. That's why we have a separate attorney in fact that we give to them, because then we can let them know, hey, look, when they ask, are you the owner, are you the seller, how long have you owned the house, anything like that, I have a rebuttal that I give them that clearly and concisely explains our position, legally speaking, but doesn't get into the details of the entire transaction, because there's no need to muddy the waters and make it confusing or make it seem like it's a scam or anything, because things that people don't understand, they tend to shy away from, right? And rather than finding a wholesale or novation-friendly realtor, you just want a competent, capable realtor. But the way I explain the paperwork to the seller is I say, okay, now this piece of paper right here just allows us to utilize the MLS if we so choose. Now, we don't use this on every single deal, which is the truth. However, it is just another powerful tool in our tool belt for us to deliver the result on a silver platter for you. Boom. That's literally all you have to say. And then the third one is the Novation Indemnification Agreement. So I'll explain it for you guys, and then I'll explain it how I explain to the seller. Essentially, the Novation Indemnification Agreement shows what the net price that the seller is going to get. It explains to the title company the replacement of contract process. And it also explains that once we sign the replacement agreement, the seller is indemnified or held harmless to the new obligations of that secondary contract. Because the contract we signed with the third-party buyer, there's realtor commissions, there's inspection periods, there's all these things that are...
Financing contingencies, yeah.
Yes, that are contradictory to the original purchase agreement we signed. So this agreement is necessary for the seller to understand, and for, legally speaking, for this all to come together, that they are now not inheriting these new obligations. We are responsible for it, and it outlines that in detail. And that's like I want to say it's like a 2.5 pager. So that one basically explains what the seller's getting the net amount, explains that we're taking on all the new obligations. But the way I explain to them is, now, Mr. Seller, this piece of paper right here is in case if our buyer is using a loan, which is a likely scenario. It outlines that you're getting every penny of the $412,000 minus any money that's owed on it or any existing taxes. But we're going to pay any commissions, closing costs, repairs, any obligations of the new contract. you are held harmless of, and we are inheriting those obligations. So your original contract is going to supersede the new one, but legally speaking, without getting too complicated, the new one may have some other obligations that we need to take care of in order to get you this higher amount. Now, whether we make $1 or we make $1 million, you're going to get every penny of the $412,000. So that you have my word on. And also in the original contract, the original purchase agreement, there is some phrasing there on the inspection period and everything where we do set the stage of if there is some massive unknown problem, kind of like you were speaking on the last video, it would be something we would need to address if there's some new information. But any minor things or things that we've already disclosed, we handle all of that. But basically, we have the option of offering up a remedy. And if that doesn't work or they say no to it, then we have the ability to back out of the deal if it no longer is a viable option. But in either way, when we part ways, there's no obligation on either side. We'll part ways as friends. So we try to cover, and it's funny, all these third-party stories came from deals that went wrong, right? And then, because in the beginning, I'd only disclose a couple of the things on there. And then after, doing enough deals, it's like, no, we need to run through this whole thing because the contract's here for a reason. We need a meeting of the minds. We need to understand it and actually help my conversion rate too.
And are you finding that when you go through those secondary documents, right, especially the novation indemnification, if you've done your job right before then they already understand the process. So that part isn't really like new information or confusing.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's more of a confirmation of what we've already said. I'm just helping you understand how this looks on the paper.
Correct. And that's why with the novation indemnification, we do more of a quick summary than getting into the weeds. Because you get to a certain point too, the regular purchase agreement is long enough, right? You have this window of going through all the information and it makes them comfortable. But once you pass this certain threshold, it's like a movie that's 3 hours long. Even if it's the best movie in the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're done after 3
You
hours.
wear them out. You wear them out. So we keep the AIF and the novation agreement very short and concise. And then once we get through that, then we direct them back up to the top for the signatures. Gotcha. And we assume the close.
And then you go back through each signature on each document.
Yeah, I just direct them, hey, there's a little colored box up there. You just need to tap it with your finger. If you're feeling artistic, you can try to squiggle in your world famous autograph with your finger, or you can select one of the pre-made ones. They're both equally valid. Yeah. And then I just zip it and wait for them, and I'll hear them in the background most of the time. Oh, I think I got it, da-da-da. Or sometimes that may be when an objection or a complaint comes up.
Yeah.
And then we just work through that, and then I direct them back.
Right.
Now, other pieces of paperwork too, for people to be aware of. You may hear people filing liens or notices of interest, right? And in the beginning, we did that on every deal. Here's the thing. Now is
what is that? Why would you do that?
So
like an affidavit, a memorandum, something like that?
Yes. Okay. So it's different things in different states.
Yeah.
And the reason I was taught that was when we first started doing it, that's how I was told this is how you justify your fee to the lender, is because it's showing up as a lien, something that needs to be cleared off of title.
You guys following that? So that fee of $30,000 or whatever it is, where is that fee coming from? You're creating one strategy would be to create a lien, and that's just a payoff letter provided to title, and that's how that gets paid.
Correct. Now, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that other than if you're doing this at scale and you're not performing, you have all these liens out here and it's messy, right? And with one of the companies I was with previously, that was the case. And there's just all these liens hanging out there. And then I also think of it like this, right? I look at the novation world as, okay, if this is something that I taught to everybody and everybody did it at scale, would it make the novation world better or worse? So if we have 1,000 people or 10,000 people all filing memorandums and liens on every property, it's going to be noticed, right? And people are going to say, what is going on with this? So what I found is most of the title companies, the lien is completely irrelevant. For us, it's a pain because you have to figure out what the process is to file it. You need it notarized, and then you also need to record the release before you can get paid. So it's this extra step and extra headache. And here's the deal. people also preach that this protects you if the seller goes AWOL.
And tries to backdoor you.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Unless you have the capital and you're prepared to buy the property, you know what I mean? It doesn't. And here's the deal. It's your responsibility to keep the seller happy. The seller wants to run away from you. You got to let it go. It's a toxic relationship. Do whatever you can psychologically to get them back on board, but that should be a rare occurrence. It's
Or
normally,
you haven't done your job right and
Exactly.
keeping the seller happy. Yeah.
Exactly. The ball was dropped and you have to take accountability for that.
Yeah.
And that normally only happens when the deal lingers on. And sometimes it's not of your fault. Sometimes the buyer's lender drops the ball. Sometimes the buyer will go and like buy a car and then they lose their loan and then they fall out, or, you know, there's been all sorts of crazy scenarios. But that's why also you have to make those equity deposits in the relationship so that when things do go bad, the goodwill's still there and you can pull from that. But yeah, so probably 95% of the deals we don't file a notice of interest. The only time we will is if the title company requires it. So in some title companies, they will require it, and then we'll do it as the exception and not the rule. So there's the notice of interest part. What's the other thing? Okay.
And the notice of interest, just so you guys, there's a lien which now is recorded against the property. That's saying that when this thing sells, you're owed this money. A notice of interest, like a memorandum, that's saying that you have an interest in the property and you're filing that interest, which now means title is going to say, okay, there's an interested party here. What's going on? They're going to reach out. And so in the wholesaling world, those memorandums can be beneficial, and they can cause a lot of problems too, because what will happen is if you're a shady wholesaler and your contract falls out and you've got a memorandum filed, now it can be used to hijack the seller in the future when they go to sell that property.
Correct.
And now that wholesaler's like, well, I'm holding you hostage till you pay me some money, and it just gets really messy and dirty.
There's people that make a whole business practice out of that.
So,
yeah.
So again, when that's happening, what Rich is saying is if you've done your job right and you've created clear expectations, you're actually doing a white glove experience, which is the whole point of a novation, is you're holding their hand through this process and they're having a great experience. Those become super rare exceptions.
Correct.
Where you get backdoored or whatever goes on, right?
Correct.
Because you've done a good job of doing your process right.
Yeah, they're loyal to you and they cheer you on when they see that you're making money.
So now you don't have to be so protective that you don't have to assume the seller's going to screw you. The seller's only going to screw you if they feel like you ripped them off somehow because you did your job poorly.
Yes.
Or whatever, right? So
correct.
So that's what you're saying. Do your job right, and those things will become super rare exceptions.
Absolutely. Yes. So signing on behalf of the seller, okay, because we did that for a while too. That's how it was originally taught. We used the AIF to sign on their behalf. We used a power of attorney to sign on their behalf. Few reasons why I no longer do that, okay? Because here's the deal. You can get away with that and get deals done. But there will be times where the lender is going to look at that, or maybe an underwriter, right, on either the title company or on the lending side. And they're going to say, okay, who is this person, right? And
they're not on title.
They're not on title. They don't appear to be related to them. What is this a disinterested party, right? And so one, the optics of it is, well, even if the seller's on board, let's say this is an older seller, and let's say they end up passing away, and then the kids go and unwind this deal later and look back and they say, well, mom had a power of attorney on this sale? Who's this person? Who's Rich Wonders? Who's Jerry Norton, right? And then they go and look, and that could potentially cause problems, right? And it also makes it look like you're hiding what you do from them, and then oftentimes people are, which, yes, that's the shortcut to actually caring for them and giving them a 5-star experience. It's just hiding it from them. But it's not the scalable model, and it's not, you're leaving all these loose ends out there and all this possible liability. And we had deals before too. We were signing for the seller where I had like 3 deals at once that the lenders were like, who is this? Explain yourself. And on one of the deals, the lender was trying to make the seller sign a piece of paperwork that said, we're not getting paid inside of escrow, outside of escrow. We're not seeing a dime from this, otherwise they're not funding. And this is when I made the hard decision of like, we're never doing this again. You know what I mean? Because the buyer really wanted the property, the seller had to sell, seller was older, she knew everything that was going on, but we weren't following this best practice. And the buyer actually went and got a new lender. That's how bad they wanted it. and got a new lender, and then we had the seller sign that, because I talked to my title company, they're like, well, if the seller signs, this will completely eliminate it. I was like, good, because I don't want this to go through.
So you're literally now having the seller sign the new contract.
Correct.
Instead of the power of attorney would eliminate them from signing anything, you're now okay to bring a new contract to that seller. You're not worried about fallout where they're like seeing a new price.
Correct.
Because you've done such a good job at creating good expectations that
Yes.
it's not an issue now.
Yes, and
And it just made your job way easier because you're not running into all these problems.
exactly.
You guys see that where that makes sense? So that's the big difference. So the attorney in fact is just for the listing.
Correct. And
Okay.
if sometimes you'll run into an agent or a broker that will not understand that and will try to say it's invalid, and then we just have the seller sign. If it's someone we really want to work with, that's the clear choice, rather than going back and forth with the agent, we say, hey, it's no problem. The seller can sign this.
So you just call back the seller and say, hey, we've identified the best agent. This is who they are.
Correct.
We need you to sign this listing agreement. No big deal.
Yes.
And it's not that big of a deal.
And when the seller signs the buyer's offer, you can also explain this to the agents that you're talking to when you're explaining your process, where you're telling them, I'm the attorney in fact, I'm the one that's going to be handling the the listing process. The seller's going through a bit of a personal situation. Out of respect for them, I'm not going to dive into the details, but I'm going to be the one selecting the agent. I'm going to be the one that's going to be handling the decision-making process.
Communicating offers.
Correct. And up to the point where we have an acceptable offer, then the seller, Miss Mary Smith, she's going to sign the buyer's offer. She's signing final closing docs, and she's collecting her funds at the closing table. That shows the agent, because let's face it, like a retail agent, they find out the person that hired me is signing a power of attorney and signing the offers. It looks shady.
Yeah.
It looks wrong.
Yeah.
So you want to work with high quality people throughout the entire process. And that's how you're going to give a 5-star experience with 5-star people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, too, they have issues hiring the agents correctly. This is a huge pain point. And they end up with the agents that are willing to work with them, not the agents that they want to work with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, guys, that was a really great process going through the paperwork. To wrap up this video, guys, be sure to follow along in the series. We have a playlist. I'll put that link in the description below. Also, check out our free Quick Start Kit, which is going to have a lot of resources that can help you do these Novation deals. And one more thing, remember that you can JV on deals with Rich and his team. So we'll put a link below that will show you how that process works. But it's great because this is something that requires a certain skill set. It takes a little bit of practice, some learning. You want to make sure you do it right because you have sellers and you want that experience to go really well. You don't want this backfiring on you. So what we recommend is that you do maybe a few deals where you JV with Rich's team. I'll also put a link below where people can get some more advanced training from you, because I know you've got some of that as well. So anyway, check out all these resources, all these links. Really what we're trying to do is just give you a really good overview of the entire Novation process. And if you're serious about this, then it's your job now to go learn how to transact at a high level. I hope you gather from Rich and everything he's sharing here that this isn't just a gimmicky thing. This isn't some like, hey, let's just push this out there, and if 1 in 5 close, great, but a bunch aren't. No, this is really how to do this at a very professional, high level. So we're excited about that, and we want you guys to learn how to do this correctly and the right way, not only so that you have success, but that the seller has a good experience too.
Yes.
Okay, so again, check out those links. And guys, we're moving right along in the series. Be on the lookout for the next video. We're really excited to continue. I think we've got like 3 or 4 more videos in this series. So really excited to bring more of that content to you, and we'll see you on the next video.